Well, hello everyone. I'm Laura Petty, County Extension Agent for Family and Community Health in Leon County. And today I just wanted to share with you a recipe that can lead to other recipes, but it's a recipe you can make at home that would save you many things. It's called a better baking mix. And so we're going to talk about the ingredients today, and then we're going to talk first of all about why we would make some homemade mixes rather than just buying them at the store. So I want you to think for a few minutes about maybe the things that you like to eat. When you bake something, biscuits or pizza doughs or whatever it might be, that there are maybe certain flavors you like in it, or maybe you want to boost up the nutritional level of some of those foods. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and then how you can use this master mix or this better baking mix to then prepare other dishes very conveniently. So there's some reasons why. Why should we even worry about fixing these convenience foods at home? And it does save us a lot of time. Not just time, but also money. When we can buy the ingredients separately and put them together, then that saves us a lot of that money of buying an already made mix. You can also control what goes into that mix. And so that's an important thing, especially when you are trying to work on improving certain parts of your diet, or limiting maybe things like salts and fats that you're trying to limit in your diet. You can control this in the situation. So it does save you many things, and you can control the different ingredients that you add in, seasonings and whatnot, when you make your own mixes at home. Now, today we're going to be working on, as I mentioned, called the Better Baking Mix. And so it does substitute for some of those baking mixes that are on the market. But again, we're going to know what all the ingredients are as we put it together. And then I'm also going to share with you some information about recipes that can be made from this Better Baking Mix. And just to let you know, I did get these recipes off of choosemyplate.gov. So that's an important website for all of us to be aware of. Besides the basic information about the nutrition and My Plate and physical activity, there are many, many great recipes available on Choose My Plate. So we want to be able to utilize that website, not just for educational information, but also for some great recipes. Before we get into this, I do want to mention a little thank you to Richard Parrish, who's behind this camera here. He is a great production director, all those things, and he's great with making these videos. And so I just want to say thank you to him for helping to put all these videos together and just making it possible for these things to happen. Well, grains are very important for us. They are one of the 5 food groups of My Plate. And they contain foods such as our rices, our pastas, our breakfast cereals. And these are made from products such as wheat, rice, oats, cornmeal, barley, etc. So we want to make sure that we include grains in our diet. So you might ask, well, how much do I need to have every day? Well, again, many times it depends on your age or your gender. Also, it has to do with your activity level and other factors, but these are some general guidelines here. So if you are a young person, so this would be parents providing for their children most likely, but from 2 to 3, you're looking at about a 3-ounce equivalent serving. And one thing that I pointed out during the presentation was talking about half of your grains should be whole grains, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. So again, that's just kind of a guide of the 3-ounce serving for a child like 2 to 3 years of age, all the way through, and it breaks it out by even going into girls and boys, and then even men and women, depending again on age, how much we need. So this is kind of a guide for you as you can find where you fit into this and find out how much you need to be enjoying every day. So it talks about these ounce equivalents here. And what does that really mean? What is an ounce serving or a 3-ounce serving that I would need during a day, or a 6-ounce serving, whatever the amount is? So to kind of give you an idea, what counts as a 1 ounce? It would include something, in general, it includes like a slice of bread, a cup of ready-to-eat cereal, or a half cup of cooked rice, pasta, cereal, those types of things. That gives you an idea then about why grain is important, how much we should have every day, and then what counts as those servings. So when we're talking about grains, we definitely want to point out that grains are divided into 2 subcategories. Our whole grains contain that entire grain kernel, and you can see the picture here. it shows those three parts of the grain kernel: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. And you can study that little graphic there to kind of get more information about it, but it's really important that we talk about those parts, because as we talk about the other subcategory, that's where these things become very important. So examples of whole grains would include our whole wheat flours, cracked wheat, oatmeal, whole cornmeal, and brown rice, and there are others as well. Now, when we get into our refined grains, these are milled, which removes the bran and the germ, which are two of the parts of the model you see here, or the graphic you see here. And there is a reason why they do that. It does give the grains a finer texture, and it helps them to stay on the shelf longer. And so in the processing aspect and getting it to customers, those are important details that will help to maintain the supply that we need out there. Well, unfortunately, during the processing, as that bran and germ are removed, it takes away the dietary fiber, iron, and many of our B vitamins that are very important. So when we see a product that has enriched flour on it, it means that we have added back to the product, we've added some B vitamins and iron. But unfortunately, fiber cannot be added back into this situation. So that's why we have refined grains. That means they've been processed to remove the bran and the germ, which ends up eliminating the opportunity to enjoy that fiber. So fiber, again, is very important, and we need to be sure it serves a lot of functions in our body, helping us to just have a regulated body and keeping the getting things out of our system. It's just a good thing for us to have. And so we want to be sure that we are enjoying those whole grains, so that we are being sure to get our iron, our vitamins, but most of all our fiber that cannot be found in refined grains. So some examples of refined grains include white flour, degermed cornmeal, white bread, white rice. Basically, if it's a white product, you're going to see that it is going to be an enriched product. And so making sure, this is where it's important to read those labels and making sure that you see whole grains or whole wheat as you are purchasing a product, to ensure that you are getting the fiber that we need. Yeah, there are a lot of flours on the market, so I wanted to just point out that you don't just have to use one flour nowadays. The market is very saturated with many other options, and so I just wanted to kind of give you a guideline. If you are wanting to prepare your homemade baking mixes with maybe some different flours, here's a guide for doing that. First of all, I just want to point out that, and I mentioned it earlier, that most recipes are really designed for all-purpose flour, unless another flour is indicated in the recipe. Now, we may hear the term specialty flour and not really sure what that means, and so that includes things like almond, barley, coconut, all kinds of flours that are out on the market right now. You can just go down the baking aisle and see so many different specialty flours available nowadays. Well, again, if we're trying to boost up our whole grain, or maybe we just want to try a different flour, here are some suggestions on how you can do that. So again, most recipes use our all-purpose flour, and so there's a percentage breakdown here to help us to replace some of the all-purpose flour with a different flour. It could be a whole wheat, it could be a barley, oat, whatever kind of flour you're looking at utilizing. Here's a percentage on how to do that. So if you want to try to increase that whole wheat and get that whole wheat or rye in there, you want to use that at about a 50 to 50 or 50% to 50% conversion. And so, for example, if we're making 5 cups of flour to use, then you want to do 2.5 cups of a whole wheat or rye flour with 2.5 cups of your all-purpose flour. So basically that recipe there of combining those two recipes will definitely boost up your whole grain intake, which is very important. We want to limit our refined grains and try to find as many whole grains as we can, and make sure we have those as part of our diet. If you're using soy, corn, or barley, you want to use that at about a 20% to 80% all-purpose flour. So obviously more of your all-purpose flour than your specialty flour, but it's just because of what our wheat flour does. It provides us that gluten and a lot of the ingredients that we need for a successful baked product. So if we're going over using maybe some oat flour, We want to do that at a similar rate, about 25% to 75% all-purpose flour. And that would include then, if we were making, again, 5 cups, you want to look at about a 1 1/4 cups of oat flour with 3 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. We'll move on. So as we talk about our better baking mix, and again, I will share the recipe, and the recipe is available at choosemyplate.gov. So what we're going to start off with is talking about our flours. So right here, of course, we have all-purpose flour, and most of your recipes for any kind of baking product are going to basically be designed for an all-purpose flour. So that's what our base is for this. Unless your recipe says it is specifically another kind of flour that is in that recipe, generally when it says flour, it's going to be your all-purpose flour. And most of the time it will specifically say that. So our recipe includes these 6 ingredients that you see here. So I've kind of changed it up a little bit, and I'll go through and show you how I've done that as compared to the recipe that I'll be sharing with you. So we started off with 4 cups of all-purpose flour. So again, this is our base, and you think 4 cups, that's a lot. Well, remember, this is a baking mix, and so you would use it to make many other recipes. You would use just a portion of this to make other recipes, and I'll share those recipes with you. So we start off with 4 cups of all-purpose flour, and I do have that in this large mixing bowl here. And then what the recipe says is that then you then want 4 cups, and it actually asks for oats. And in this situation, I am using oats, and it also mentions that you can use whole wheat flour. So I'm using actually a mixture of whole wheat flour and oats that I have actually ground down into more of a flour. Okay, so again, just to do that, all you would do is put your oats, and I particularly like the old-fashioned oats. They are just have more of a texture to them, and that's what I typically use. Just stick those in a blender or food processor, process them up until they are more of a flour texture. They're not going to be quite as fine as an all-purpose, but it'll be okay for your mixing batch here. So I made a mixture. Again, it calls for 4 cups, and it calls for either oats or whole wheat flour, and what I've done is a combination here today. Again, with our baking mixes and all, most of the ones that are on the market are just made with all-purpose flour, which is what we call an enriched flour. Unfortunately, during the processing to make the all-purpose flour, the fiber is stripped away. And so fiber is a very important ingredient in our diets, and so we need to find ways to put whole wheats, whole grains back into our diets. And so that's where we put in with the oats and with the whole wheat flour. That boosts up the whole grain benefit of this recipe here. So that's an important detail, because my plate talks about the importance of grains in our diet, but half of the grains that we eat every day should be whole grains. So that's very important for us to keep in mind. So that's why I talk about when our recipe is versatile and we can set it up the way we want to. I did this mixture here to kind of make it, to really boost up the whole grain value of this. So what I did was about 1 cup of the oats. Again, put in a blender or food processor and blend it down. So that's our oats there. And then I also took whole wheat flour. And so again, it calls for 4 cups of the other flour besides the all-purpose. And so this here is 3 cups to add to the 1 cup of the all-purpose flour and the oats. Okay, so we've got those 3 ingredients there. Then we also have what we call non-fat dry milk. So again, this is just a dehydrated milk, and the recipe calls for 1 1/3 cup. And yes, it's getting to be a very large item, because, or large bowl full, because we are making a good portion of this mix so that we can then put it up and use it very quickly in the future. Also calls for a teaspoon of just good old salt. So again, we control that we're not preserving the food like they do in the grocery stores. We are maintaining a very low level of salt, but salt is a very important ingredient in our baking process. And then the last ingredient is our baking powder. And our recipe calls for 4 teaspoons of that. And it's very important in all of these ingredients that we measure them very accurately. So again, I'm scooping out, and I'm using that to kind of level that off. So that's 2, 3, and then our 4th. And that is basically our better baking mix. And again, it does look a lot different than what you might find in the store because of the whole grain or the whole wheat flour that we've added in here. So again, that's boosting up the nutritional value of our dish. So you want to store this then in an airtight container such as this. And what I would recommend, you're probably wondering, well, that is not all going to fit in there. Well, what I would recommend is that most of the recipes that I'm going to share with you using this recipe or using this baking mix is probably that 1 to 2 cup range. And so I would put them up in maybe 1 or 2 cup portions, and that way they're very easy when you want to grab them to pull them out. And even something like a freezer bag would be a good source to use, that you can portion out that 1 or 2 cups to put away in the refrigerator or freezer. Just remember that it needs to be an airtight container so it can protect that. And then you can store that. And I just recommend refrigerator or freezer because it will definitely last longer that way. So from this recipe then, you can create several different things, but the recipes that are found on choosemyplate.gov are things like pancakes, drop biscuits, a pizza, and then sugar and spice cookies. So you have everything from the savory to the sweet available from this master mix here. So it's a very nice blend of lots of different grains and flours, and then our milk mixed in there, and then of course our very important ingredients of salt and our baking powder to help with the leavening process. The baking powder helps with that. Okay, so that's a mix that I wanted to share. And then also I wanted to talk about our mixes of maybe blending in different flours, and so I'll share some information about that with you as well. So as I mentioned as we were talking and putting our mix together, here is our recipe for the better baking mix. So again, I did use a mixture of the all-purpose flour, the 4 cups of that, and then I used a mixture for the 4 cups of quick rolled oats that is indicated here. I used 1 cup of oats, old-fashioned oats, and then 3 cups of whole wheat flour to really again boost up our whole grain in our baking mix. And of course you saw the non-fat dry milk, the baking powder, the salt, and we of course encourage to put that in some sort of, once it's mixed up, put it in some sort of airtight container to keep it safe for us to use. And I recommend that we store it in the refrigerator or freezer just to help to make it last longer. And you want to try to use this within 6 months. And what's nice is this recipe comes from choosemyplate.gov, which is an excellent resource for finding out about nutrition information, but has great recipes as well. Using this better baking mix, you can use that to make pancakes, biscuits, pizza crust, and even cookies. So there are recipes. So here's one for pancakes using the better baking mix. Here's another one for drop biscuits, and this is again, I recommended storing when you go to store your better baking mix, to put it into 1 or 2 cup servings so that it will be easy for you to pull out and use in a dish. What's nice about this drop biscuit recipe is besides just the basic recipe, you can also then, there are some variations down at the bottom where you can add a different flavor, maybe throw in some fresh herbs or whatever it might be, to enjoy a different flavor with your biscuits. And then this is a recipe that's also again found on the choosemyplate.gov. It is an easy as a mixed pizza. And so again, we find in the stores where you can buy a box of pizza crust mixture and whatnot, but this is using that baking mix and some other ingredients to actually make an entire pizza. So obviously our baking mix and a few other ingredients would be used for our crust, and then there are the other ingredients there. And again, pizza is one of those things that you can, change it up, add different things that you want to, boost up the veggies on there, whatever it might be. You're welcome to create your pizza however you would like. And then the last one is a sugar and spice cookies. So again, just a good way to, maybe have a little snack or a reward one day is to enjoy some cookies, and again using our better baking mix, and again using those whole wheat flours or oat flours or things like that that will boost up our whole grains is very important. So I hope you've enjoyed. I appreciate listening, and please share it with others. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact our office and I'll be glad to visit with you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to sharing more tips with you. Thanks.